I think knowing that my joy is inherent and actually that it's not something that exists outside of me. Like, even if we don't, and I think that's kind of that feels like that was a big pill for me to swallow, which is like, I had to, and I think this is something that is challenging for a lot of people, is that it's easy, well, maybe not easy, but the habituated conditioned response is to be blaming other people for what we have and don't have.
Jamila, my friend, friggin' welcome to the Feeling Free podcast. And from what I understand, you are feeling extremely free this week.
Yes, thank you. So happy to be here, sincerely.
Yeah, well, tell us, we're going to jump straight into it. Like, one thing that really resonated with me of like why we're speaking and like why you inspire me deeply. And I feel like your love, and that's really difficult to do, right? Like through social media, is to like portray love, but I feel it from you, and is to dive into joy. I love how you're talking about we are worthy and deserving of joy and to like really thrive. So we're going to get into all of that, but you are just right now, this week, tell us about this fear and this taking the leap that you just barely did.
Yes. So on Monday, that is exactly 4 days ago, I quit my full-time day job that I have been working for the last 3 years, and have been, honestly, I got this job because I wanted something that was flexible enough so that I could essentially set myself up to launch into working for myself. I needed something that allowed me the spaciousness in terms of the schedule, and also working from home, to be able to kind of still do my side hustle. And this year, it just became increasingly apparent that it was in the way. That at one point it was kind of the launching pad, and then it was setting me up for launch, and I was still still there. And so once I kind of came to accept, like, oh, okay, this thing that was once facilitating my, progress into further alignment is actually now obstructing my progress into further alignment. And so I quit my job on Monday. I put in my notice. I was like, this is it for me. And I'm going to go full time with teaching and guiding and writing. Yes. And yeah, I am terrified. Truly, I'm scared. But I'm also excited. And I feel, this has been one of the best weeks of my life, because I feel the freedom. Like, it feels like there was a weight. Like, I kind of felt the weight, but now that it's been lifted, I'm able to perceive, in fact, how heavy it was. So I just feel so free.
Oh, well, first off, congrats.
Thank you.
Like for real. And it seems from your social media presence that you know how to celebrate, but
yes,
which is amazing. Like, seriously, because that's something that I personally had to like attune myself to and like be really conscious and intentional with. But you mentioned something which I think is really key, or a lot of things, is how it was the launch pad for your next step, for your growth, for your purpose, and then it was obstructing it. A lot of people think it's either or, like it's, you know what I mean? But I like how you were able to see how it was really beneficial, and then it was actually detrimental.
Right.
Like, will you like expand on that? Because like that can really be, whether that's sometimes a relationship, a job, anything,
Totally. I think so. I'm definitely a sort of like, I'm a visionary, and I know that probably resonates with you too, but I'm able to kind of, and I also super enjoy being able to sort of visualize a trajectory, or kind of see like, okay, first, this is what I need. And a few years ago, I was very clear that home was sort of my big goal. That was the thing that I felt like I am couch surfing. I was just like truly living my 20s, I was like couch surfing, like living in basements for the summer, like kind of doing it all, going to Mexico, like just trying to figure out where to be physically. And I realized because I'm spending so much of my like mental currency and my energy currency is being invested in home, in moving and settling and decorating. And I thought I need to reclaim that energy. I need to settle so that I can have the kind of, I can reinvest all of that energy and attention towards building up, you know, my purpose work. And so once home was established, then I was like, boom, okay, I got my apartment. It's cute, you know, manifested a like really nice place near the park. It was wonderful. Felt really good about that. So I was sort of finding myself moving through all of these different phases. First, I wanted to get the home. Then I wanted to get the job that was flexible. Then I wanted to, you know, start working on my purpose work. Then I wanted to, you know, I had this sort of step-by-step plan. And I think what happens for me and also for a lot of people is that you kind of get lost in where you are in the process. You know, you're just sort of like going through the motions, and then you forget that you even had this big, beautiful vision. And then all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing? Like what, where, you know, and I came to that moment with my job where I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I know this isn't what I want to be doing long-term. I know this isn't really feeling fully aligned with, you know, the work that I really want to do. So like, why am I here? So I was kind of sitting with that, like, what is going on? And then I was like, oh yeah, a few years ago, I manifested this because these were the conditions that I needed. And now I have surpassed that. I've sort of grown out of those conditions. I've now expanded. These conditions are now too confining. But at one point, 3 years ago, it was like it was what I needed for me to be able, because it was so challenging for me to think about launching a business when I was like babysitting and working at restaurants and trying to like piece together my income. True. What I needed was not to be, that again is such a huge energy leak, is to be thinking about how you're going to survive. It's hard to be creative and imaginative when survival is something that you have to contend with. And so this job was a way that I was able to take survival off the table. I had paychecks every 2 weeks. I had health insurance. And that enabled me to really get into a space of imagination and creativity around my purpose work. And now I just, with a lot of self-reflection, I'm very intentional about, I journal almost every day. I do meditation. So I am very purposeful and intentional about paying attention to myself and noticing when I have shifted and when the shifts that are happening internally are not being reflected in my external world. That to me is like, immediately I feel it. It feels, I call it like spiritual sickness or dysfunction. Like it feels like something is off. And I'm able to, because I've been so fortunate and intentional about not living in that feeling of something is off. Like I worked so hard to get out of that whenever it's happening, I'm like, oh wait, no, this cannot, I can't let this go on for too long.
Man, you're saying so many great things. This is, okay, I'm going to try and remember this, all of what I want to
You got this.
So first off, I want to say that feeling. So whatever that sick feeling was, you said you focused on living out of that. Like, what is that? And what causes that?
The spiritual dysfunction. So so spiritual dysfunction is kind of the language that I use to describe the feeling of not living in alignment with who you truly are. So that who you truly are, who you are at your core, the base of your being, your true self. Some people call this your highest self. In Buddhism, they call it Buddha nature, but it's sort of like the truth of who you are. Whenever your lived experience, I'll speak for myself, when my lived experience, my environment, my relationships, how I'm spending my time, my thoughts, my words, my behaviors, when they are not reflecting my truth. So if for example, I believe myself to be powerful and necessary.
Yes.
I know that I have healing capacity. When I am spending my time not using my power to support other people in ways that are necessary for them, then I start to feel like it's like dissonance. It's like there's something about, it's kind of like I'm performing, like there's my truth, but then the way I'm moving through the world is kind of like I'm acting as if I'm not powerful and necessary. And living in that performance starts to feel like it's kind of like crazy making, actually. Crazy making, to use the word very literally, like it starts to feel like Like, you know, I'm like at the end of the day, like, whoo, long day of performing, you know, it's like, it's exhausting. And it starts to feel like, yeah, this doesn't feel good. Like, I don't want to have to put on or to pretend that this feels good for me or that I'm loving it. You know, I don't want to have to pretend in a meeting that I'm like totally into it, you know, and we're talking about future plans for the company and I'm like completely checked out. Like that doesn't feel good. That starts to, there's like an inner kind of knowing that's like, hey, this isn't you. So yeah, I think that's when it is, like when I feel like when it's really the performance, when I feel like I'm acting.
That's beautiful. Like, and I assume that almost ties into, like you said, surviving. So almost like the performing. So I'm curious, like, how did you even get to that place? How did you even recognize that? Well, I'm curious, like, so at what point of your life were you just surviving? How did you recognize you're surviving? And then how did you begin to move out of that?
That's a great question. How did I recognize that I was just surviving? I think it's that I believe deeply that we're always who we are. We've always been who we are. You know, I think everyone has a story that you can point to as a kid where you were like, yes, I was totally myself, like that 3-year-old me, you know, that like whatever we do when we're children, that kind of shows us that we've always been who we are. And I think for me, realizing that I was kind of trapped in this survival pattern was feeling disconnected from the things that make me me. Because I was exhausted, actually. Like I was coming home and kind of not having the energy or the life force to do things that sparked joy for me. That I was kind of just going from work to recovering from work back to work. You know, that's kind of like, that's really it. It's like, it wasn't like, and it's not even a full restoring, or it's not like, you know, when you're recovering from work, you're like, you know, it wasn't like deep restoration. It's kind of like, I'm just going to charge up enough to be able to do it again. And I have been at my whole life since I think, you know, maybe second grade. I mean, I have dozens of journals. They're stacked. Dozens of journals that I've been journaling my whole life. And that's just been something that comes very naturally, that I have sort of almost always through most of my life been engaged in this process of externalizing what's happening in my mind and seeing it on the paper. And I do a process. Have you heard of morning pages? I talk about morning pages all. So I do morning pages. And for those of you who don't know, morning pages is a practice. The language was created by this woman, Julia Cameron, who wrote this book called The Artist's Way, which is a workbook for creative recovery for people who are trying to reconnect to their creativity, to their authentic self. And the practice is every morning, first thing in the morning, you write 3 stream of consciousness pages. So I've been doing morning pages now consistently almost every day since 2015. So 5 years. And so what I love about morning pages is you know, it's easy sometimes to lie to other people. Different, I find, to lie to yourself. You know, so it's like every day I'm writing and reflecting, and usually because it's the morning, it's my worries, it's the things that are sort of feeling sticky for me. So I'm able to see, you know, like, dang, I've written about this not wanting to work every day for the last 13 days. Like on day 14, it occurs to me like, okay, well, maybe you should make a shift. Like it's kind of impossible to ignore something that I'm sort of literally looking at every day. So journaling, morning pages definitely helped me recognize that I was in that pattern of like survival recovery, you know, or working recovery. And you had a follow-up question. What was the second half of your question?
I know, but that's beautiful. Like, I like how you said it's work recovery. Like it's not deep restoration. I mean, I feel that for sure. And I'm
so
sure
many folks.
tons of people. And it doesn't even have to be work necessarily, or just anything that feels like performing again.
Right.
So I forgot what the follow-up question is, but now I have another one. So as far as, so you said you've been journaling since like second grade. Are you naturally like this joyful? like when I look in your eyes, right, is like, so I'm asking this for a point because people, it's ask me this, like I'm maybe not as like energetic, but as far as just like chill and like foundational and grounded. So I'm just curious, like how much of is this natural, but at the same time, this is tricky because it is natural, right? And you believe, and I also believe that it is like our birthright and that is within us. So how do you balance that nurture versus nature aspect?
That's a great question. I think I will say first that I'm very fortunate and in many ways feel very privileged to have had circumstances and particularly parents and family that really supported, nurtured, and affirmed me and my joy. So and now that I'm home, to give folks some context, I moved back home. I live with 7 family members. I live with my mom, my stepdad, my stepsister, my grandmother, and 3 children, my 2 nieces and 1 nephew.
Amazing.
And it's so beautiful because I'm able to see kind of in this wild, like, it kind of feels like looking into a time capsule to see the way my mother and my grandmother engage with the children helps me understand why I'm like this. I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so loved on and so affirmed. And so that I think is a huge part of nurture, that I was greatly affirmed, encouraged, celebrated, loved on. And I was always, I was celebrated for being unique. And my parents loved that I loved to journal and I would write poems and I was very theatrical, and that was encouraged in me. So I know that is partly how that seed, it wasn't, I think a lot of people have that seed within them, and the way that they're raised, they're taught to bury it. But I feel like my parents really helped me nurture it. So that's one thing. But then also I've cultivated my joy. I'm very intentional about cultivating my joy. And what that means is getting very clear about what are the things that help me be joyful. What are the things that are obstructing my access to my joy? And then prioritizing, either uprooting the things that are obstructing and then cultivating the things that support it. And so I don't know, Ben, if you know, but my sister died suddenly. My sister died in almost to the year. She died on August 18th, 2018. Oh, wow. She died suddenly of an overdose after being sober for 2 years, leaving her 3 children behind. So we now have a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Huge traumatic incident. No one expected her to go. 6 months later, my dad died from cancer. So I have a very intimate relationship with grief. Yeah. And what those two life-altering experiences helped me understand is that grief is inevitable. Yeah. It's not that I'm not, there's not like, it's just me. Every human being, if we're alive and we have a body, we're going to experience death, loss, grief, suffering, pain, that there's no way to be exempt from it. So knowing that it's coming, knowing that it's coming compels me to root myself in joy, in alignment, in rest, in pleasure, because it's sort of like, this is kind of how I power up. I know that because grief is inevitable, my joy also has to be as intentional so that when it comes, it doesn't knock me over, that I'm not so far removed from joy that these difficult moments disconnect me from this sort of inherent potential for joy. Because it's so easy when you're grieving to get lost in this narrative of this is it forever. Yes. I can never be happy. This is so awful. This is so hard. I'm going to be stuck here forever. Also, I think a lot of people, myself included in the past, avoid feeling the depth of our feelings because we don't trust that we'll be able to pull ourselves out. So joy and being intentional about being joyful and finding things that support me being joyful, that is how I build self-trust in knowing that I'm going to be able to pull myself out. I don't have to be afraid to let the grief completely wash over me because I know that joy is accessible because I'm really intentional about feeling it. And also grieving gave me permission to claim my joy. There's this Buddhist saying, those who have suffered the most deserve to become the happiest.
Ooh.
And I took that thing to heart. I was like, okay, I deserve every ounce of abundance, every ounce of laughter, like all of the goodness. I think grieving gave me permission not to question whether or not I was deserving of joy. Because I understand that everything works in balance. And so if I grieve deeply, then I also get to be as deeply joyful.
Man, I love that. Like, yeah, I mean, that's dope as hell. And like, as far as someone, man, I just feel like, I just think this is really cool because you're at this really cool juncture. And for people to understand that, like, it's like where you are in your life, right? As far as just like, you just quit the job, like your job, you're jumping into teaching full time. But for you to be like where you are, that's funny. I was on a trail run thinking about this morning, is like, you don't need to be like famous. You don't need to be like uber successful. You don't need to be known to like live the life of your dreams or to thrive and have joy.
That's right.
Right. Cause I was like running and like, I was overlooking like this peak of like these mountains. And I was like I never like on a Friday morning at 9, you know, I'm like, thank God I'm not in an office. Like seriously, I think about that almost every day still. But it's not like I didn't have to do, it's not like I don't make $1 million a year or anything like that, you know? And so I think this is, I like how you said, just access your joy. It's very accessible. And I think this is a very important point to make. So for people who maybe, because I'm like you, where I was showered in love. And I had someone tell me one time, Ben, you grew up around such love so you can show others what it's like to receive that love.
Mm.
And so that's part of, I think that's like you and me, right? Is like, that's why we're loving, but then that's also going to repay like the collective, you know?
That's right.
So how do we teach like the people, like I think of people who have really been like oppressed for a long time or grown up in a culture or just like a neighborhood. And that's really like, Jamila, that's all they know. All they know is like fear. And like, I'm getting chills right now. I'm actually like emotional. Like all they know, they don't know joy. So how do we teach them?
Mm. I think that people do know joy, that it's something that I feel like all of the lessons I'm learning, I'm actually remembering.
Oh, I love that.
I'm remembering that. I think that we all have a touch point of joy that we can refer to. And it might be buried. And for many people, it's super, I mean, it is, you got to dig that sucker out. But I do believe that it's in there, that, you know, and I tell people that I work with all the time, every desire that we have, everything that we crave, at the root of it, at the core of that desire is a feeling. So we want home because we want the feeling of safety. We want a relationship because we want the feeling of love.
Yeah.
But how do we know that we want love or safety? How do we know? It's like, I've never had a food craving for something I've never eaten, you know, never. So similarly, I think with our desires, we are able to recognize it as a desire because we know it already. And so I think if you crave joy and you crave peace, stability, it's because you have a frame of reference, whether or not you can actually intellectualize where in your life you felt it. And maybe it was fleeting, but you know it enough to want it. And so I think knowing that my joy is inherent, and actually that it's not something that exists outside of me. Like, even if we don't, and I think that's kind of that feels like that was a big pill for me to swallow, which is like, I had to, and I think this is something that is challenging for a lot of people, is that it's easy, well, maybe not easy, but the habituated conditioned response is to be blaming other people for what we have and don't have. I'm like this because my parents, or I'm not like this because my circumstances. But knowing that I am the sole author of my story from this point forward, from this moment forward really helps me take responsibility over my life. And I think there are a lot of folks who allow themselves to stay stuck and disconnected from their desires because they're still giving their power away and saying, I can't be happy because my parents were trash, or I can't be happy because I hate my job, or whatever it is. Like, I can't be happy because, right? So like whatever comes at the end, I can't be fully happy until, or I can't have my desires until these conditions are met. And so I think for people who hold that narrative, I would encourage you to reframe that actually knowing I can be happy no matter what. I can access the fullness of my desires regardless or despite my circumstances or my past. I think that is like a mindset shift that opens the door. That opens the door to being able to access that joy, is knowing that it's available to you no matter what.
Man, this is dope. I'm loving it. So like, I think just to highlight a couple of things that you said is, one, it's not the past, right? It's that it's yours to access going forward, and to like reframe that and to claim that power, which I think is a distinction, right? Because there may have been wrongs or mistakes or whatever you want to call them, like in the past, and so like going forward, I think that just like that's a key thing that you said. And then with being deserving of joy, and then also how you said, I like how you brought the food metaphor in of,
yeah,
because how can you like crave something? We don't, like, I've never tried, I don't know, like some exotic fruit. Like, I'm not craving it because I don't know it.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's like, but you do know joy. I think that is this is such a gem, that why would you crave it if you don't already know what it is? So
That's right.
You already do know it, and to remember it. That's so cool. And so when you've worked with people or with yourself, or when you see in, your relationships or society, what is the relationship of, I feel like the word deserve is icky to some people. Like, I'm worthy, or I deserve this. What are your thoughts and experience with that?
That resonates, that, it can feel a little like deserve to me also feels a little funky, because deserve to me makes me think of like, I deserve this because I've done something to deserve it. So there's that, deserve, I think, is kind of like, yeah, you deserve this because you've done something to have warranted that. And I think I use the language that feels most empowering to me is inherently worthy. It's inherent. So I don't have to do or be or produce or create or solve anything to be inherently worthy. When I came into human form, the moment I arrived, I was inherently worthy of a beautiful life. I didn't have to do, there's nothing I have to do. There's no one I have to become. There's nothing I have to prove. But that because we're alive, it is part of being alive. And that's actually a deep belief of mine, is that we are alive to have a beautiful experience, period. I don't think we're here to do anything else. I think we're actually alive in human form to have a beautiful human experience. And I think a lot of that is also, for me, my beautiful human experience is very rooted in service and very rooted in purpose. And so it's not saying that I can just, I'm just here, I'm going to just like meditate all day and just like live my best life, and I have no accountability or, there's no interconnectedness. It's not that. It's that for me, living in alignment with my purpose and being in service of the greatest good of all is what gives my life such deliciousness. And that gives me such meaning and such a deep sense of, I mean, I can't say it enough, but purpose. I feel like I'm here for a reason. And that is part of what makes my life beautiful, is feeling like I'm here for a reason. So I think, being inherently worthy is that knowing that just because you're alive, that you are entitled. You are entitled to a beautiful life because you're a human being.
I love that. I completely concur. As like entitled. I mean, that's also another thing that people could get stuck on, right? But it's like, but literally, like, you are like because you're born, because you're here, no matter what, yeah, you're inherently worthy and like entitled to that.
Yep.
Like for real. And it's like, and I think I saw someone comment on one of your photos about when you were talking about this. I can't remember which topic exactly it was, but they were essentially saying like, hey, Jamila, like nice caption, like you make it look so effortless, like effortless while I struggle, you know, and which I totally, I mean, relate to that. But again, going back to the beginning of you going on this new journey, you said you're both terrified and excited, which they're technically the same chemical in the brain.
That's right.
Right. But it's like I would love for you to talk about that of, it's like, look, like I am terrified. Like, even though I'm talking all this cool thing, like all these cool things, I know I'm inherently worthy, but I still feel fear. Like, just what is your feeling with fear, but still like moving forward, like, and moving through it and loving yourself and having compassion?
So I I had to really redefine my relationship with fear, because for so much of my life I was operating under the assumption that fear meant danger, or that fear, very physiological,
Yes.
physically, that it means that there's harm is on the way. Because you are afraid, it means that there is something that can hurt you to be afraid of, that there's a reason to be fearful because you're in danger, or your livelihood, your life is actually being threatened. So being able to separate the feeling and to be able to discern, okay, the feeling of fear does not necessarily mean that, death and destruction is impending. It means that, it might mean that there's something new, or that, like you said, I'm excited. But learning how to take fear and actually say, like, okay, using fear as a teacher. So if so
Yes.
right now I'm afraid, and of course, I externalize my fear. So I'm afraid mostly of losing my job, or not losing my job, of losing access to healthcare. That's really the thing that feels like the stickiest for me, is I'm afraid. And that's a physical, that's practical, right? Like that's a legitimate concern, right? Not having health insurance is like, yikes, especially in these United States, like that's a precarious place to be for a lot of folks. So that to me feels like an actual fear. Now, what I have to do in my own mind is say, okay, what's actually at the root is death. That's actually, if I follow the fear, like, what am I really afraid of? My fear is that something's going to be really wrong with me, and that I'm not going to be able to afford the healthcare I need, and then I'm gonna die. Okay. So I have to be able to be like, okay, this is not going to happen. Like, that is the fear thought, is the feeling that I feel is because the narrative points me to death. And,
Yes.
so I have to remind myself that it's like, actually, fear is pointing me to my value, which is wellness. Is wellness. That is actually the thing that I don't want to lose, is my wellness, which is within my control. My wellness is not dependent on my health insurance. My wellness is dependent on how I value my life and the ways that I move through the world accordingly. So my sleep cycle, eating. Now, granted, right? Like if I get cancer, okay, or some, God forbid, something that I can't treat on my own, I have to be trusting that I'm not moving through the world alone. Like you said, we're interconnected. And even, I even do, like, okay, even though I try to encourage people not to visualize the worst case scenario, sometimes it is useful to
I
just
agree.
sit with the, like, what is the most absurd
Yes.
fear thought? Like, okay, what if I get some like incurable disease and I don't have the health insurance to pay for it? Then I was like, okay, I'll just make a GoFundMe and tell the people of the internet that I
Yeah.
have a disease and I need support, and I'll watch the money flow in. Like, like, it's not, I'm able to sort of talk myself out of not even talk myself out of it, but just recognize how absurd it is by naming it. Like, I'm not gonna die because I quit my nonprofit job.
I love
Okay.
this.
That's not the thing. So recognizing that the fear is actually like something that is rooted in a real concern. And then also thinking through, okay, well, even if the thing that I'm most afraid of, even if that were to transpire, knowing that I have the resources internally and externally to navigate any circumstance that comes my way enables me to not let fear like boss me around or prevent me from moving forward. And it's a lot of self-trust, actually. Like I I have navigated things that I thought for sure would destroy me, for sure. I think, people, because my sister struggled with addiction, I used to think, man, if she ever died, I don't know what I would do that would destroy me.
But
My
you
life
told
would be
yourself that?
over. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the worst possible thing. When my father was diagnosed with cancer, worst case scenario would be that he died, right? And not to say that it wasn't awful and traumatic, but I'm still alive and you're able to perceive my joy, right? So it's like, even I know that I've survived the hardest things so far. I know that also my challenges will continue to level up as I do, but knowing that that I have, again, the inherent capacity to navigate and overcome even the most challenging of circumstances, enables me to sort of face them. And not say, because I think a lot of people don't take big leaps because they don't trust themselves to be able to survive. They're like, that would destroy me, right? Like that narrative of like, that would completely ruin me, or I wouldn't be able to get through it. I wouldn't be able to handle it. I think that is really the thing. It's not the incurable disease. It's not believing that I would be able to handle it that keeps me stuck. So trusting, like, no, anything that comes my way, I actually have the wisdom, the compassion, and the courage to be able to move through it. It might not feel good. I might not move through it gracefully, but I know that it's not going to destroy me.
I love that. Preach. Like, I love that so much. And like, one thing I love is that to really talk about is fear reveals where you're not free.
Facts. Jeez.
Because it is, right? And so that's why it's a teacher. So my whole like life purpose and mission is to really change our conversation and relationship with fear. Exactly. So I absolutely love everything you said. As far as it is a teacher, it's literally showing you, right? It's like, hey, if you want to become the next level of joy, the next level of fulfillment, the next level of peace or ease or whatever that is to you, it's like, it's literally pinpointing to you.
That's right.
Like where to up level. And so that's why it's a gift, but then that's why it's like terrible at the same time, because we don't listen to it. And I love how you said, I love how you actually brought up imagining the worst case scenario. I love it just because it's like the acceptance of it. It's like, let's just say you do end up on the street. Like, let's say, you have an amazing family, right, that can take care of you, but let's just say the worst case scenario, I end up on the street. Are you still fully capable of living joyfully in that moment? Right? So it really is like, it's acceptance. It's going to those places because, like you said, it feels like death. But it's like, no, let's actually just entertain it. Let's just go there. And like you said, it doesn't feel good. It's not like ideal.
Right.
But
might not love it.
Yeah, but like, seriously, if I was on the street, I would still go to a park, or I would go to a warm beach or something like that. You know what I mean? And it's like, so it's like all those different things. Of course, I'm not promoting that, like, don't go do that, but just accepting that, like what you said, your joy is still accessible. You're still here. And it's that self-trust. So that was amazing. I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about manifestation.
Love it.
Let's do it. Cause I know you have a manifestation masterclass coming up. So what is like the dopest thing that you've ever manifested?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh. I think the dopest thing that I've ever manifested is probably a harmonious family.
Ooh.
My parents got divorced when I was 8. I was in 3rd grade, and it was devastating. I mean, it was like my whole world shattered. And for 20 years, my parents didn't really speak to each other. For 20 years, 2 decades. And shortly before my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I started practicing Nichiren Buddhism. And
how old were you at this time?
I was 27.
27, okay.
And I started practicing Nichiren Buddhism, which is basically, it's the practices of chanting. You chant the title of the Lotus Sutra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. But a huge part of the practice is identifying your desires, your dreams, and the theory or the philosophy is that desires are enlightenment. That everything you want, everything you crave, is actually the thing that will help you. It's the motivator, right? So like if you don't really want freedom or alignment or abundance, then you're going to stay the same because there's nothing motivating you to change your behavior. And so in Nichiren Buddhism, which really resonated with me is that they're saying, no, you don't have to cast off your desires. Your desires are enlightenment. Your desires are the fuel for you becoming the fullest version of yourself. In order for you to have everything you want with no exception, you have to deal with the parts of you that are not serving you. You have to face your shadows. And so this practice, I was like, okay, what do I really want? And also what feels like almost impossible? Like what is the thing that I just so deeply crave? And what I came up with was, I want my family. I want my family to be harmonious. I want my family to be well. And literally 3 days later, like 3 days after I started practicing, it was three days after I started practicing this Buddhism. I mean, I was like, that was what I was, praying for. I was calling in. And in Nichiren Buddhism, a prayer is not a request for something outside of yourself. It's a determination and a vow to create the conditions that enable that thing to be possible. So when we pray in Nichiren Buddhism, we're not saying, oh, dear universe, please let my family be harmonious. We're saying, I commit to making causes that support the effect of my family's happiness. So 3 days later, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And to make a long story short, it was during my father's recovery process that my mother and my dad, after 20 years of, probably speaking cumulatively 3 hours with each other, my mom went to the hospital. My mom happens to be an oncology nurse because of my life. And so she was in the hospital. My dad was like in a coma, basically, wasn't speaking, non-responsive, had lost like all, capacity for words and movement. He was not doing well. And my mom went to the hospital, laid in the bed with him. And said, this is Karen. My mom's name is Karen. She said, TJ, this is Karen. You need to get up. And he opened his eyes. He hadn't spoken, moved,
chills.
Right? And so she literally held him, and they were, and he cried and was able to say like, I've always loved you. And this was my biggest loss, was losing you in our family. And they had this huge, this has been weeks after I said, I want my family to be harmonious.
Wow.
And at first, my mom said, do you want me to go to the hospital? Like, I was taking care of my dad in the hospital every night. I wasn't leaving his bedside because I was like, I was so afraid that if I left, something would happen to him or he would die and be alone. And so I was like around the clock. I was like, if he's going to die, I'm going to be here the whole time. And if he's going to live, then I'm going to see him through. And so my mom had asked me originally, like, Jamila, do you want me to go? Do you need support? And I was like, no, Mom, you haven't spoken to this man in 20 years. This is the most vulnerable state he's ever been in. He's literally might be dying. Do you think that he's going to want to see you? Like someone he hasn't taught y'all, to make him better? Like, that just doesn't seem right. But then at a certain point, I just couldn't do it by myself. And I just, she was like, do you want me to go? She asked me again. I said, yes. And from that, allowing myself to be supported by my mother, that created the conditions for them to have the healing. And then after that, they developed this beautiful friendship. We were going out to eat meals together. Like, I have photos from my family when I was like 6, nothing until I was like 28. And we're like going out to dinner together. My dad was coming over for birthdays. Like, this is just, I almost like couldn't have imagined it. Like, even my own imagination was limited in thinking about the healing that was possible. And certainly, my dad passed away last year, but still in that time, they were able to find that healing and able to reconnect. And I think that, of course I can't take full credit. Like, I did it all, I manifested it, but I absolutely said, I want this. I want it more than anything. And I am willing to feed and to nurture the seeds that make this, healing garden possible. And so that to me is like my greatest, that feels like the dopest thing I've ever manifested, was that knowing that in the end of my father's life, he was able to be in a deep friendship with someone with his soulmate.
Wow.
That my parents were able to tell each other that they loved each other. My mom held my dad's hand as he was dying. Like,
Wow.
It was so beautiful. And I think after so much disconnection and trauma and unspoken feelings, to be able to sort of connect again and find that togetherness and that peacefulness, and to be able to express love after all of that, after 20 years, to me is like that was probably the dopest, just to see my parents like loving on each other after not even having the physical memory. I don't even remember my parents being together, but being able to like experience that was so healing for me and so profound. And I take a little bit of credit.
Well, damn. I feel like that was moving. Holy cow. I feel like that needs to be a movie or something, because that just like, I feel like I just watched one of those movies and I'm like sniffling and everything. I was like,
oh, well, if anyone listening knows any producers, let them know that we got a story in the works for you.
Well, and what I love about that, Jamila, is, because we often mistake love for romantic love. And, but what I loved about your parents is like, just that, like, just the purity of it, and how it's always there. Right. And it was there, but fear got in the way of it.
That's right.
And yeah, but that's just so beautiful that, like, cause you didn't need to be like in a romantic partnership to like have that,
No, I mean, they have children together. So, that love was still there. Yeah. It was so beautiful to watch. I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah. I mean, damn, that better be the dopest thing.
Okay, for real. I'm like, I could talk about like vacations and stuff, but like, my parents finding healing and like forgiving each other after 20 years. Yeah, that was probably the dopest thing.
I love that. But, so just like, I mean, that's hard to top, but as far as like, just some tips for manifesting that maybe some people overlook, or maybe some things that are blocking, what would you advise?
So this is what I tell people always, first and foremost, when thinking about manifestation. So I'm a writer, so I'm always, like, probably every day, I look up the etymology of a word, what courage, compassion, whatever it is. So manifest comes from the word that means to make evident. So when we're manifesting, what we're doing is making something evident. So if I've manifested, let's say, if I manifest money, I am making evident my own internal abundance, that what is inside of me is now evident on the outside. Now you have like the actual physical look. You see my beautiful house, you see my beautiful life. That is evidence of my inner world.
Love that.
And so when thinking about manifestation, I think it's kind of a, buzzword, and it kind of feels like, well, I'm a manifest, again, pulling something from outside of me. I'm reaching for something that is out there that I want to get closer. And in fact, manifestation is actually about cultivating your inherent qualities such that your environment, kind of without manipulation, without any actual, you kind of don't really need to do anything other than to really cultivate your best qualities. Your environment will mirror you. And that's something that it's like, don't take my word for it. Truthfully, try it. Like, if there's something that you want to focus, even if it's courage, or if it's wisdom, or if it's love, whatever your inherent inner qualities are, when we commit to cultivating those and to strengthening those and kind of polishing, in Buddhism, there's this metaphor of polishing the jewel. Like, everybody's got a jewel, but it's maybe, it's like in the dirt, you just kind of have to like clean that thing off and polish it. When we do that, then it shines. Like, when we're able to polish the jewel of our inner world, then our outside world reflects the work that we've done internally. So knowing that you're never reaching for something outside of yourself, knowing that a huge part of manifestation is about becoming more of who you already are and strengthening your best qualities.
Will you repeat that again? I love that.
Yes, that it's about becoming more of who you already are. Manifestation is truthfully about becoming more of who you already are at your core and strengthening your best qualities. And I think that redirecting your focus and attention, because it's not external. I think we get so caught up in like, oh, I really want, this house, and I want this car, and I want this job, and that our energy and attention is so focused on the external that we forget that actually all of that is a result of what's happening in our inner life. So shifting your attention inward creates the conditions for those things to become possible. Also, another huge manifesting tip that I love, and this, it is like the secret or creative visualization. There's lots of, people talk about this using lots of different language, but that a useful, like, practical strategy or practice that you can start doing today is to what I call sit in the feeling. Mm-hmm. So again, if you want, I keep using home as a metaphor because this is something that I desire. Living with 7 people, it's no wonder. But so instead of just like thinking, intellectualizing, it would be really great if I had this connecting with the feeling. What does it feel like when I am grounded, when I'm comfortable, when I'm spacious, all of the things that I think home, having a house, is going to give me? And you can actually write this down. You can make a list. What are all the things that I want? Okay, I want a lover. I want a boo. Okay, why do you want that? When you have that, what will that create for you energetically or emotionally? Well, that's going to create support. I won't have to do things alone. Okay, sit in the feeling. Literally sit down, connect with your breath, and sit with the feeling of what does it feel like when I am supported and surrounded by resources, when I have access to everything I need because I'm surrounded by people who are able to support me in having it. What does that feel like? And again, you know what it feels like because you want it. So you have the memory, but connecting with the feeling, the essence of your desires, and being in the feeling does 2 things for me. One, it reduces the sort of the kind of urgency. Like, I'm not so pressed. It's not like I'm so desperate. Like, I feel like there's a desperation sometimes when you want something really badly and it feels accessible to you. When I'm able to sit in the feeling, and the mind is a truly magical and powerful place. You can actually feel, you can create, you can send signals to your brain, through your brain to your body. I am supported. I am loved. Mm-hmm. And that actually is a physiological response. Your body responds. So having that feeling reduces the desperation I feel, because I'm able to kind of, it's like, you can't have the whole meal, but you can have a taste. It's a sample, right? So you get to sample it and kind of, remember the deliciousness of it, so that it's not something that you're kind of like forgetting you have access to. But that also, when you're in the energy, that's what you're radiating. Right? Like your energy is sending like radio waves to the universe that says, more please, more please. So how you operate is like your energy is on loudspeaker to your environment that is saying like, I'm a magnet for this. So when I'm sitting in the feeling of ease and groundedness and abundance, then I am sending out these strong radio waves that say, more please, this is what I want more of. As opposed to, I don't have it, it's far away from me, it's going to be hard to get it, right? Like that is then the frequency that you're emanating. So I think it feels like you're kind of attuning yourself to harmonize with what you want, to feel it in the now.
Yes.
And trust that it's not something that it's not a future reality, that it's actually the essence of it is accessible to you in the now moment. And the more you sit in the feeling, then that is, to me, that's actually what manifesting is. You're kind of creating the energetic conditions for that. Again, you're cultivating that internally. Mm-hmm. That becomes, I'm cultivating my own inner sense of abundance or of support or of love and of ease. And then the universe is responding to me.
I love that so much. I mean, like, just everyone just rewind, just listen to this again. But, and the coolest thing about what you said is like the mind or the imagination is that it is truly powerful. And I think we don't realize it. And we still don't know, like me and you, even though we go in those places, we have no idea, right, of really like how powerful it is, which excites me. Like one of the things I like to say is like, I am limitless and like, show me what's possible. Like seriously, like almost like seriously, like, I don't know, kind of like what happened with your parents. Like you really had no idea, that can actually happen, So it was like, you were shown what's possible. And all of that, what you said, is free. Just to recap this, like we were given that, like imagination is free. Like everyone has that.
That's right.
And it's like, that's the coolest thing. It's way more complex and smart than any supercomputer, And so again, right, is like the best things in life truly are free. And it's like, and it's inherent again, right? Like just to kind of like recap all of this, like we already have everything we need, like everything that we desire is within us.
That's it. I'm like, what else is there to say?
Yeah.
It's true. Yes, facts.
I could talk to you, like I'm really aligned with you for sure. Like, but what does feeling free mean to you? Like, when do you feel you're most free?
For me, feeling free, it really feels like knowing myself. And again, I think, it's coming back to, it's like self-trust, self-knowledge, self-awareness, but it's also being connected to my truth. So when I feel the most free is when I feel like I have no obstacles. I mean, literally, it's like I am free to pursue my desires. I'm free to be myself. I'm free to have what I want. And I think that feeling, the feeling of freedom, is actually the feeling of knowing my capacity, knowing my power, knowing that I am responsible for my life, and that nothing can take my freedom away unless I give it away. Also, there's a 2-year-old who's trying to get in my room right now. So perhaps you might hear her. But yeah, I think I feel most free when I'm really connected to myself. When I'm connected to my power, when I'm connected to my, those best qualities, because those are the things that kind of remind me that I have access to everything I want, that there's not someone controlling my destiny, that in fact, I am in control of my destiny. And so being connected with that truth, is when I feel my most free. Also, like on a practical level, like on a beach anywhere with like nothing to do for the next 7 days. That's like when I'm like, yes, this is my life.
I love that. That's well, like Jamila, like, man, I love your spirit. Like this is like, seriously, you're so, you're beautiful, like in so many different ways. Like this was awesome. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your mental currency.
Thank you.
and just like your wisdom and your love. Like seriously, I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. Same to you. And also, this is such a beautiful platform that you have, because I mean, fear is, everyone I work with, my clients and my students, this fear is the obstacle.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, that's the thing. It's like every time it's the fear. It's like whatever you think is the obstacle, at the core is actually just fear.
Yes.
And so I think it's so powerful and so profound that you're creating a space for people to face it, and to not be in a space of avoidance. And that is so, I mean, talk about freedom. It's like when you're able to befriend fear and to be able to just say like, yeah, I'm afraid. This is just a fact. Like, I don't have to be fearless. I think that's something that's so beautiful. It's like, we don't have to be fearless. And there's so much, people feel like they've got to, like, I'm supposed to not feel fear. It's like, no, boo. No, that's not it. You're not supposed to feel fear. You're supposed to feel fear and trust yourself to navigate through it. So, so grateful for you and for this platform, and to be able to be here and be in conversation with you. For real.
Thank you. Yeah, this was dope. Like, I mean, the whole classic, podcast thing, like where can people find you? But not just find you, but like, I want to phrase this in a new way. Where can people like, not just connect, because that's something they say too, but I'm trying to like, where can people love with you? I don't know.
Yes. Let's see. So maybe where can people like be in community with me? That is something you can be in community with me on my Instagram. My Instagram is at Jamila Reddy, and my website is jamilareddy.me. And because I quit my job on Monday, you will be seeing way more offerings. My vision and intention is to create an online school. So to be able to host conversations and workshops and trainings and have resources where people can really dig deep and work with me one-on-one, but also in group settings. So for real, stay posted because it's coming. But my website and my Instagram, and I also have a podcast. Do you know about my podcast?
So I went to it, but there's been a break, right?
There's been a break. I needed a break. But yes, my podcast, Deliberate and Doing It Afraid, is there's a couple episodes that you can dig into, and we'll be releasing more throughout the rest of the year.
Amazing. I'm excited for you. Like seriously, it's just to kind of experience your internal world for an hour is like, I'm just excited like for what you can teach and guide and like empower. And because I know that you're coming from an empowering place to make people in power, because that's really what you've just been talking about. Is not, and it's people already have it within them. Is like, it's not like I'm giving it to you or I'm giving you the answers. It's like, look, I'm just kind of like reminding you or removing what's in the way.
That's right.
And so you have my support. You're dope.
Thank you, friend. Same.